in time. So, without further ado, let's go for the talk by Alan de Genaro. Alan de Genaro is with the Getúlio Vargas Foundation and São Paulo School of Business Administration. Alan is a no-timer friend of ours, has participated in many of the research in options meetings, and I remember very interesting conversations with him from the very beginning. It's really a pleasure to see you again. I understand you have also collaborated with Marco Avellaneda, and you'll certainly tell us a little bit about that. With Alan, he's going to talk about pricing, contingent rights in football. Alan, thank you very much.
No.
Yeah, we can
So,
hear.
okay, thank you, George, for the kind invitation to be part of this uh, uh, research in option edition, which is celebrating Marco and Bruno. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And this talk is a new subject I'm studying, and I think the idea is quite interesting. And I try to cover not exactly all the maths and the computations behind, but to give the idea of what we are talking about. So, first of all, first thing first. Here as we have the audience all around the world, including United States. When I say here football, I definitely am talking about football as we Brazilians and Europeans call this sport. And so we are talking about players in football and not in US, in American football, despite the fact these are great two teams that I have the pleasure to see. The New York Giants in 2012, the Super Bowl champions, and the famous 2002 Brazilian squad led by Ronaldo. So these two are two great squads. But when I say football, I'm talking about this left side sport. Okay, very well. Bring to the related literature what do we have. So we have many papers dealing with pricing of the players. So one of
Alan,
them,
sorry, there's a little message from Google in the middle of your screen. You might want
I have
to
no idea how to.
maybe
Okay,
ocultar.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, perfect. Thank you, Mateus. So we have this literature dealing with pricing football players. I just present two of these papers. The first one is Tanuro, Clark, and Vinay, 2005, Review of Financial Economics. And the idea is pretty much use a standard option pricing model to calculate the price of a football player. And they use this kind of performance index as a way to calculate that. But the framework is pretty much what we have when we deal with options on when the underlying is equity. The only difference, and again, borrow from the financial literature, they include unexpected events that could impact the player, such as injuries or suspension, such like that, by using a Poisson jump process. So pretty much they use all the techniques from the traditional option pricing theory to calculate the price of a player, right? The second paper that I present, the idea is Miller, Simons, and Weinman. Is a more recent paper, 2017, European Journal of Operation Research. And what they do, they try to estimate the player's value using regression analysis based on the attributes of each player and the championship the championships, the players are related, and the characteristics of the team. So is a standard regression, multi-level regression, when you have different layers and you need to combine these individual layers to get the final result for the player. So this is the literature related to, and most of the papers are devoted to calculate the price of the players. Some are using index like the one before, and others trying to measure individual characteristics of each player and somehow to aggregate and obtain marked value of these players. But what I'm trying to address here, right here, is not exactly the same. I start again. First thing first, I bring we deal with the what we call or FIFA calls as the solidarity mechanism. And what is the definition of the solidarity mechanism? In 2001, FIFA carried a huge reform in his bylaws and in his regulation, particularly the articles 20 and 21st, and this change was aimed to introduce a mechanism to offset uh, 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 a team for spend time and money investing in the player in the beginning of his career. So the whole idea is, if I am a professional player, a football player in Brazil, and I move to play in Europe, the total amount of the transfer, the marked value of the player, 5% must be paid as a compensation for the club or the club involving the training and education, right? So the whole idea is to avoid what used to have before 2001, when clubs could pretty much say, I have the right to retain the transfer of a player because I still want to receive a certain amount of money, because when this player was young, I invest a lot of resource and I want to be offset for that. So there is a very famous case involving a team in Belgium, and the player tried to move from Belgium to France, and the club in Belgium do not authorize the player to move from Belgium to France, and the team was claiming that they have rights to receive because they invest more than they would be compensated with the transfer. So this case end up in the justice, and after that, FIFA decide to say, okay, now I am officially involved in this aspect, what may be good or not, but in the end, FIFA tried to regulate this process. So it's a very now standard procedure when a player move from one team to another, the solidarity mechanism must be applied. So the whole idea is, as I'm here, for instance, when a young player start to train in the clubs, in general, around 12 years or less or a little more, depends on the country. But if I'm a football player training in a given club, and I spend there, for instance, 4 years from my 12 to 16 birthday, the team responsible for my training is entitled to receive 2% of all transactions that I am involved in the future. So is a way, as I said, to compensate the training club for the time and the effort to transform that young football player in maybe a star like we have many around the world. So is one thing interesting is this amount should be paid in relation to the transfer fee. Later on, I will provide some figures, and then we can see what the size of this amount we are talking about. But one important fact is this solidarity mechanism is applied until the end of uh, all the transference I am involved to. For instance, after the 24th birthday, and I move from one team in Brazil to United States or to Europe, the training club is still entitled to receive the rights related to the time I train in the regional team. So the end or the solidarity mechanisms is applicable every time one player move from one jurisdiction to another. So if I move from a team in Brazil, inside Brazil, this solidarity mechanism does not apply. But when I move from countries, that mechanism apply. In Europe, for instance, each country is treated as a jurisdiction. So if I'm playing here in England and I move to Italy, the mechanism will be applicable. Okay, so when we look at the highest all-time transfers or the wild, what do we see? We have the number one is Neymar, the second most valuable football player involved in a transfer is Mbappé, both from players from Paris Saint-Germain, and Neymar, for instance, was involved in a transfer related to 222 millions of euros. So that is the reference value that will be used to compute the solidarity mechanism that the training club is entitled to receive. Okay, so here is the sources transfer market, the main data hub for this type of information. So the solidarity mechanism in practice. Let's take Neymar again example. Neymar has two transfers in his career so far. One from the original club in Brazil, Santos Football Club, the same who had Pelé as a player, as a star, and Neymar changed from Santos to Barcelona, and later from Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain. And these two last transfer involve around 310 million euros, and the club Santos is entitled to receive 4% because is the number of years Neymar was a Santos Football Club player before he moved to Europe. So from the 5%, which is the highest value that a team can receive, Santos received 4%. So so far, Santos received 12.5 million euros only related to Neymar. So at each transaction, and later, if Neymar is transferred, for instance, for more, like 250 or less, regardless the size, the new transfer will be applicable for the solidarity mechanism. So it's not the difference of the market value, it's not the increase in the price. So each transaction will entitle the training club to receive that transfer value multiplied by the percentage related to the solidarity mechanism, right? So this is what we are dealing. So this is the solidarity mechanism. The question is why Santos, for instance, had to wait for any transfer related to Neymar. So they could securitize these receivables. So let's assume Neymar will later be transferred to England, which is one of the most competitive and rich leagues in the football. So probably Neymar will be transferred for more than 220 millions of euros, and then Santos would be again entitled to receive a percentage from of that value. So when we bring these subjects in this matter, we are dealing with securitization. And the whole idea of securitization is transform a liquid asset, for instance, a receivable, into something that can be traded. We all know about these standard securitization products like residential, commercial, mortgage, auto loan, credit card, obligation loan, all kinds of assets that can generate receivable, can be uh, packaged in a product and sold to the market. So then you can anticipate a cash flow today. And the whole idea, as I said, is to anticipate the cash flow, and these cash flows are due it unless a default event occur. So I will receive a payment related to a mortgage unless the owner of the house stop the payments. And so the difference that I'm trying to illustrate here is when we deal with a securitization process, we have a cash flow, a well-known cash flow related to the underlying pool of assets. So that's the whole idea. And the main difference when we talk about these contingent rights that we want to price. So in general, if you have a basket of any players, the contingent amount related to that players take into consideration the solidarity mechanisms would be the sum of the players, the number of transfers. So capital T is, we explain here, capital T is the time horizon applicable for transfer. For instance, a player with 40 years probably won't be transferred, but a young player will be more likely to be transferred. So capital X is the market value of this player. Uh, Delta is the percentage related to the solidarity mechanism that I said, for instance, Santos has 4% of Neymar. And this last term is, in fact, the one describing a transfer. So when we, and of course, as we have cash flows in different point in times, we need to discount all these cash flows to the current date. The main difference here are these terms in blue. And these terms in blue are what we call the contingent part of this cash flow structure. Again, different from a standard product such as mortgage-backed security, which the payment is known in advance unless the assets in the basket defaults, all the payments are due. And here is the opposite. We don't know if the receivables are due unless we know that player move from one team to another, right? So the whole idea is, okay, we need to deal with this contingent part. This contingent part is formed by two terms. The first one is how to value a football player in the future, right? The second one is how to model the transfer. I want to model the transfer not inside the country, and I want to model the transfer, and the probability of the transfer is related to the age of the player. So all these two objects involve dependency among them, and here we will present the modeling strategy related to how to model the future value of the a player. Fourth thing, market value or transfers fee are very heterogeneous. So if you compare a football player with the same age, playing the same position, uh, uh, the transfer values are quite different. So we need to incorporate this heterogeneous behavior in our pricing model. So to incorporate this heterogeneous behavior, we identify three main factors. First is the current age of the player. Second is the position of the player. Goalkeepers and uh, defensive players are less valuable than players like attacking midfield players, right? And the third component is the quality of the championship or the league of destination, not the league of origin, but the league of destination. So if I'm going to play in Turkey is one thing, but if I'm going to play in England, is a completely different market value for a player with the same two characteristics above. Okay. Okay, so to incorporate this fact I mentioned, we classify the championships in two tiers. Tier one is formed by Premier League, La Liga in Spain, Serie A in Italy, Ligue 1 in France, and Bundesliga in Germany, and all the championship are in not this far, this five one are grouped in the tier two. Okay, so here just some figures. I have in the left side, I have the comparison of the market value in the x. I have all the market values, and here the number of players playing in these two tiers groups. So tier one, again, the most sophisticated and the most rich leagues, and tier two is the less rich league. So we see the difference is quite clear when we compare both market value of players from these two different groups. And but even inside a given tier, for instance, if I compare a left winger, which is the case of Neymar, with a defensive player, again, we have a different distribution of market value. So I need to incorporate these heterogeneous behavior related to market value. We are not comparing one player is very different of other, so we need to incorporate these features in our model. The second component is to model the transfer probability. The transfer probability is a function of the age. So younger players are more likely to transfer than older players. So I need to incorporate the conditional probability of a transfer given the age. And here, what we have is in blue, we are capable to estimate the given that have a transfer happen, I can compute the age related to each transfer. So I have the likelihood, so I can observe the age of each player who transferred from one team to another. And in red, I have the prior of the transfer. So the prior is one of the only parameters we cannot observe in the market. The all other variables we can infer from real market or real transaction, and then we can estimate what would be the value for that variable, right, in our model. So a second important component is we first we have the probability of the of transfer. Second, this transfer will be for a club from tier 1 or a club from tier 2. So what we see is we have, as I showed before, the distribution, the market distribution of values of players in these two tiers are quite different. And so I need to incorporate this difference. And on the top of that, what we see in transfer is the fact that this transfer process is persistent. So if I'm playing in a tier 1 championship, the likelihood of moving to a tier 1 team is higher than move to a tier 2 club, right? So that's the whole idea. So once I have the definition that I presented before, I can estimate the pricing of this contingent receivable using the standard Monte Carlo simulation for this kind of solving this kind of problems. And the whole idea here is rather than impose a DGP or a parametric form to model the price, the market price of these players, and the time of a transfer, usually the transfer model by a jump process, independent jump process, I'm trying to use market data to estimate that information, right? So the whole idea is observing data publicly available at transfer market website. We have detailed information about most of the players, and we select a data set with 3,199 players, okay? And for each player, I have the name, the age, the position, the team he is currently playing, the current marketplace, if he plays for the national team, and all the features related to each player. And we also have information related to the transfer. So in this case, I'm using the season 1920, where I have 1,039 transfers from these countries, from Italy, UK, Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Russia, China, and Brazil. So all these countries compose the majority of the transfer we observe in the 1920 season. Okay, so here presenting what we have, as I said, in our sample we have 3,199 players, and the breakdown according to position is here in this table in the left. Here in the middle, I have the breakdown in tier 1, tier 2. Here I have the age of this player, and this chart shows the market value of each player, right? When we move to the transfer, the transfer probability, as I said, here I have the number of cases related to a transfer according to the age of the player. So we see, as I said, there is a peak in the middle or a certain age where is most likely a player be transferred. And after that, the likelihood decrease almost to zero of 36 years. And here, again, what I call this transaction, this conditional transition probability. So if I'm a player from a tier 1 championship, the likelihood of staying in a tier 1 team is 74%, right? So
2 minutes, Alan, please. 2
okay,
minutes.
okay, perfect. So here I can measure dependency among or this persistent behavior in transfer. So let's go to results here. What I'm comparing or I'm presenting this methodology apply for two teams in Brazil who are in the process of securitize these rights. So here in the left, I have team one, and this team one has a basket with 5 players. In red is the current market value of this player. In blue, I have the density obtained after 1 million simulations of this process I present. And here I have the what would be the contingent price of this receivable right here in the left. In the right, I have a second team in Brazil, which has 7 players in in this basket. Again, in red, in this vertical bar, I have the current value of this basket, and in blue, I have here the density, and here I have what would be the price of this basket, considering that the one or more the players can move from one team to another, the price can increase, and then what would be the present value of this receivable? Again, this contingent receivable. Very well. And again, why this is an interesting topic? Because, as I said, more than one team, and here I'm bringing the first one, which is willing to monetize these contingent rights, is trying to anticipate or securitize the receivables related to a basket of players that Vasco was the training club. So is this new is from this month, right? And that is why this topic is quite interesting. So it's not only a theoretical idea, but is indeed a practical aspect related to funding football teams in Brazil, not only in Brazil, but all around the world. Okay, so my final remarks, the whole idea here is how to price a basket of contingent rights. So it's not a single contingent asset or a standard cash flow, but a contingent cash flow. How to do that? And the whole idea was to avoid as much as possible model risk. So we try to use data information from real transactions related to football players to estimate and calculate the pricing of these contingent right. And here I just briefly presented this whole idea related about the transfer prior, which is very important to the model, and they play the same role that implied volatility plays in standard option pricing. So once we have prices for these rights, tradable prices, we can estimate that parameter. So that's all I have prepared for you. I hope you enjoy the presentation. And here I'm pleased to take your questions. So thank you again for
Thank you.
your time and for the opportunity to present this project with all of you.
Thank you very much, Alan. So we have time for a quick question, and we, as usual, from the usual suspects or usual suspect, we have a question. So the question is from Rafael Duadir. A very high value transfer may, on the one hand, increase the value of the player, but also reduce the probability of a transfer, which becomes very expensive. What is, in practice, the impact? And he hasn't finished yet. How do you estimate the expected value of the transfer, given that it is very fat-tailed? Do you model a Pareto distribution? Alan?
Um,
I guess you can pick up one of these questions and attack it, and perhaps we can leave the discussion for later on.
Okay, sure. Great question, Rafael. And well, the short answer for your questions, I'm not using any particular parametric distribution to model our variables. So I'm just using real data obtained from transfer market data set. So I'm not using Pareto distribution. Regarding your first question, I see your point, but if but I'm not an expert in football clubs and the dynamics related to why to hire or why to buy one player rather than another. But what I think they have in mind is not exactly the current price of the player, but how much they can monetize by having that player wearing the jersey of the team. So I know when Neymar was bought from Santos, they used to say that the most of the value paid was obtained by Barcelona by selling jersey from Neymar. So in one hand, is you are right, you can uh, uh, decrease the likelihood of the transfer, but as far as I see, these are two different objects. So I guess is not directly related. And both Rafael and Julian are saying Italy is in tier one. Sorry, that was a mistake. Italy is
Okay.
definitely in tier one.
On that note, I think that given that Italy is in tier one, we should perhaps stop here. Thank you very much, Alan. And I really enjoyed your talk and appreciate your presence here. I'd like to conclude with a brief remark. This is then the 15th edition of Research in Options. This is a special edition with COVID in mind, and I hope that next year we will all be able to be together physically again, although we might even consider also some distant online connections. The end of this meeting is particularly important because we are celebrating the fifth birthday of uh, Marco Avellaneda, and we're going to have a group picture, and I hope everybody who is listening can join us at the site that is on the chat. It's the site of the Google Meet for the chat for the break of the event. And I'd like to thank all the speakers, all the participants, all the moderators for their effort, and I hope to see you next year. Let me once again remind you that this is a joint effort from IMPA and Khalifa University, and we had the sponsor of Diamond Investments. And thank you again. We go now for the live pictures.
Okay. Bye.